Thank you very much, guys. Hydra Reloaded certainly cementing that they are one of the tournament's favorite team. Lishuna Romana, very well respected and constant competitor here at the Alliance tournament, but they were wiped out. Let's go back to the match before quickly, Varone, and talk a little bit about the Hugans and the Golems. So as Angel Hun explained, the Hugans are there and they kind of take the speed away and allow the Golem to do exactly what?
Basically, the Golem can hit a lot heavier and a lot harder if it has the ability to target pin, which the Hugan does for it, and keep a target held still. If he's using rage torpedoes, then he's just going to do an absolute immense amount of DPS. Unfortunately, he didn't stay on the field long, and he didn't really get the hurt down on the opposing team. But if they're used correctly, they just run so much DPS with them being a Marauder class that they're very difficult to counter.
They certainly are. Diagoras. It's not all about spaceships. There's a little bit about CCP we need to talk about as well.
All right.
You do something special at CCP. You work with a group of people that come and visit us every few months.
That is correct.
Would you like to introduce them?
Yeah, I am involved in the Council of Stellar Management Project. They're a group of players who are democratically elected by the EVE community to come here and tell us the community's thoughts on how we should be doing things. We just had elections recently with record turnout, with over 39,000 people voting, and they're actually here next week, which is something we're really looking forward to.
Which is nice. We have friends that come visit us all the time. We have our tournament commentators this week, and next week we have the CSM people. For the people who are sitting at home going, these CSM people, they just want a free trip to Iceland. There is actually a lot more work involved, though, isn't there?
There is a lot of work involved. On the side of the CSM, they have a lot of meetings, several hours every week that are put in by almost all of the CSM members on looking at the issues that players bring up. And if anyone does want to bring up issues with the CSM, they can do so through the Assembly Hall and the forums. And these are brought up in CSM meetings, which are then brought to our CCP by the CSM.
It's true. I've actually attended several CSM meetings, and I have 2 next week. They are a great place for us to get ideas, a great place for us to get feedback on what we're working on, and it's just fun to get like a community voice that is like in an easier way to understand than just going through the forums.
Yeah.
And the forums are still nice, but it's still like a very good outlet for us. Do you see the CSM as something we're going to continue doing for always, or?
I certainly see that. We've gained great value from having CSM so far. They've provided invaluable feedback on everything. Whenever we have any particularly large issues, we often talk to the CSM and ask for their opinions, and it's something which we're starting to really need. We're certainly not going to be stopping that anytime soon.
I have to admit that on all my major life decisions, I consult the CSM. Should I buy this car? CSM, help me out.
They help with a lot of things.
They do.
Especially housing decisions.
Especially housing decisions. They're
really
very, very clever on that exact area. No, but they're very good, and I certainly look forward to seeing them up here again. Let's quickly talk about Lishuna Romana and Hydra Reloaded. In the first match, we saw bombers but no bombs. The second match, we saw the bombs come out. They did a lot of damage. Bombs are a bit of a different weapon. Angel Hun, how do these bombs work?
They are a directed remote AoE weapon. They're launched. Generally, you're not going to see more than 1 volley of them at a time. They're also required to be all of the same type, as each bomb has a resistance to its respective type. So what you're going to see are bombers, usually 5, launching that swarm of bombs, and they travel about, I believe, up to 40 kilometers, and explode with a 20-kilometer radius. And within that radius, the larger the ship is, larger the sig radius, the more damage they do, up to the max sig radius of the bomb. So what happens is, especially like you saw with -10 versus Reformed Voltron, one of the major issues that happened was -10 turned on all their micro-warp drives, so made their ships effectively 3 times larger, and were dealt 3 times more damage from those bombs. It's a really interesting tactic. It does require quite a bit of coordination. I'm terrible at it.
Much like they were.
Yes, yeah, much like they were.
Yeah.
Well, dodging them is not very hard. You just go the opposite way.
That's the thing. We see some of the really good teams who, when they have bombs launched, they keep their drones at bay, scatter, get out of range. Once the bombs are there and they take minimal damage, they launch drones, keep going. There's like a massive quality difference in teams, and you can sometimes spot it when you have bombs because you just see their reaction to it.
A lot of it, I believe, is presence of mind, because you see this weapon, really this weapon of mass destruction coming at your face at a very fast rate, and it's a twitch reaction. And it was interesting, Walter Capella spread out very, very rapidly. If the Own Alliance had bombs, I'm not sure how effective they would have been.
Yeah, I think so. Well, let's talk a little bit about Hydra and Lashuna specifically then. That was a little bit of a slaughter, wasn't it? What went wrong there, Paul? I mean, Verone, sorry. They lost a Slipnir early. It disappeared from screen at least. We don't actually have confirmation that it was off the field. But even if they'd had it, I mean, was it just their strategy? What went wrong?
I think, well, we saw the first use of Munins, and I think what they were trying to do there was, as Kill2 said in his commentary, they were trying to sort of counter the stealth bombers with like a long-range artillery platform, hopefully able to slow them down, hit them hard, give them a lot of alpha and try and get rid of them. But Hydra are just a class act. They have been from the start, and I have a bit of a history with Hydra on the forums, all the trolling and stuff, but they're a class act and they're really showing it. Their strategy's been sound from the start, but I'm just wondering when they're actually going to switch it up and when they're going to change what they're doing, just so they don't get too complacent and get knocked out. It's going to be interesting.
That is certainly the risk you have. One thing we noted just as the match started was that their setup looked a lot like Pandemic Legion's last one. What was the difference? There was a Rook more and PLs, but otherwise it was kind of similar. It was like, was it a jamming stealth bomber setup kind of thing?
Dampening, I believe. Definitely dampening for those ships. It's very similar. Pandemic Legion's setup was and has been incredibly effective. I believe they went a little heavier to the ECM side. I guess perhaps playing it safe, but I really think they could have dropped one ECM with the amount of damage that came out of them within the first 30 seconds. Really impressive showing by them. And they really only hit 2 ships with those bombs, but that's just enough to frazzle a logistics pilot. And it was just unable to keep up.
Yeah, certainly. One of the things that isn't necessarily relevant to this match, but kind of, because it does involve Hydra Reloaded. We had a situation this week where Pandemic Legion were practicing on Singularity R test server, where many of the tournament teams go to practice. They whip up different setups, see how they perform, and Hydra Reloaded were tired of Pandemic Legion spying, and Pandemic Legion, of course, notorious for knowing everything that goes on everywhere. And they simply locked their training station down and effectively prohibited them from training. Verone, is this like kosher? Is this allowed?
Well, some of what they did, I believe, was against the rules for Singularity. You're not allowed to interfere with other players' testing outside of the free-for-all areas in FDMLJ. But in my personal opinion, I think it was a bit hilarious. I mean, Pandemic Legion are known very well for metagaming, and a lot of large alliances are. It's how a lot of people survive. You know, they'll keep an eye out, they'll spy on people, and sometimes things get pretty underhanded. But I think in terms of Hydra, it's just been a bit of a laugh and a joke, and they've just had some fun with it, and credit to those guys. I mean, it seems like they've really ruffled PL's feathers.
PL did seem a little bit upset. I mean, how detrimental can this be to a team? I mean, will this mean that PL will fall apart, or I mean, how big effect does that have, Ingo?
Well, PL's personality cult is a little bit sensitive, so maybe they won't be as effective as they have been. The team has been together for a long time. I'm not sure if it's really going to affect their tournament team. Perhaps they were just getting more practice in on a tertiary setup, or even a quaternary setup. But I thought it was pretty hilarious. They got out-trolled by probably the least clever individuals on the forums today. So it's
harsh words, but it was not entirely allowed, but it was kind of funny.
It was.
Regardless of which, let's go back to some of the CSM talk. Yeah. So how do we see the topics that the CSM bring up? Do we see them ever go into game development? I mean, do we use them historically?
Historically, we have. One big example of this is actually turret and weapon stacking, which was brought up by the CSM as an issue and was actually implemented. They're also very very much pushing for a lot more industrial ships, which is something which we saw later implemented with the Orca.
Yeah, and I think that every now and then when they come up here, there's a few issues that we always take up and do, and at least from looking at the CSM forums, where some of the topics are already being discussed, I can already see like a few things that we might just pick up and put in just because they make sense.
Yeah, there are a huge number of small balancing issues and so on, which are brought up by the CSM.
Yeah, and I mean it is good because as much as I think that the people in game design, including myself, are smart, beautiful, wonderful, incredible. Yeah. There's only about, what is there, 10 of us.
Yeah.
And you know, we'd be lying if we thought that the ideas of more than 300,000 people would just not be relevant. I mean, it's great to get the feedback.
Exactly, which is exactly what the CSM is there for. They're there to listen to the community and bring back the message of the community to CCP.
Yes, and they've certainly been doing that, and they will next week. I can't wait to meet them. I always get along well with them, and I always enjoy the meetings with them.
It certainly is going to be an interesting week.
It is, it is. Do you know what else is going to be interesting these 2 days? I am very much looking forward to it. We have our schedules here. Angel Hun, check out the schedule today. If that is not amazing, I'm not entirely sure what it is. If you're to pick a match here, what's your favorite today?
For the first half before the break, I want to say Voltron versus AAA, but the rematch between Circle of Two and Red Overlord is forefront in my mind. Circle of Two actually putting out, so confident with their tactics, their calm, their stoicness. They put out a video of themselves performing last weekend against Red Overlord. An incredibly impressive setup, and not just starstruck because of the ISK fielded. They lost the flagship and still went through. It was an incredible match, and whoever decided on this bracket really either has an incredible sense of humor or is just a fantastic foresight.
How about you, Veron?
I'm going to go with Angel here. I mean, both teams have been awesome. They've done really well. The only other thing that comes to mind is I really want to see actually Usher Khan versus Dead Terrorist, because Usher Khan, sort of the underdogs, they've taken a little bit of flack in the past because they've kind of gotten to the qualifying stages. Sometimes they've gotten through into the knockout stages, but they haven't really done well. So
yeah, I agree. We are ready for the next match. It is Cry Havoc versus Agony Empire. Those are two quality teams as well. Just quickly, say one.
Cry Havoc.
Cry Havoc.
Cry Havoc.
Cry Havoc.
And let slip the Dogs of War.